Nothing will crush a real estate investor's spirit like landlord stress. The difference between being successful and miserable in managing properties is education. Welcome to Landlord University, where landlords learn. Landlord University is recorded from inside the RentPrep office, where Stephen White and Jeff Pearson share the lessons learned from working with some of the most successful landlords.
Welcome to Landlord University Night School. I'm Jeff Pearson, and this is my co-host,
Stephen White.
Hello, Stephen. How are you doing this evening?
Pretty good, Jeff. I'm excited to get started on a topic here that, I got to be honest, I don't have a whole lot of experience in. Being in the Northeast, drought is just something that does not come up very often. We definitely get our fair share of rain. We get our fair share of snow. Not a huge issue for us. So I know that you're going to be sort of the authority on this coming from California. This is something that you guys deal with a lot.
We had an episode a week or two ago about natural disasters, and it got me to thinking about the fact that we're kind of in the middle of a very slow-moving natural disaster with this drought that we have. So I thought it would make sense for us to talk a little bit about what landlords can do if they're in this situation. And certainly out here in California, we're facing it pretty significantly. And landlords have leases, and in those leases, if it's done well, the landlord has a clause that says that the tenant must maintain the landscaping outside the property, which means water the lawn, water the plants, make sure nothing dies. But at this point, you're getting to a situation where in some towns you don't have any water, pretty much. But for the most part, we're limited in how much we water. And first of all, we need to be sure that the tenants are not overwatering. I don't know the laws in terms of who's responsible, but I would assume that if you're overwatering, it's the tenant who's going to pay the price. But the simple way to solve that is make sure that all of your landscaping has timers. Mm-hmm. And then instead of watering 7 days a week for 15 or 20 minutes, you can reduce that to a limited time. Lawns don't require as much water as we like to think they do. You can water them once or twice a week for just a little while, and that'll keep them alive enough so that once the drought is over, you can go back to a normal watering schedule. But the other piece to the puzzle is it might make sense, especially if you live in California. Look at the landscaping you have and see what changes you can make to that landscaping to reduce your need for watering. I mean, you certainly could go to a desert landscaping, but I don't think that's necessary. There are other types of plants that you can use that really use a reduced amount of water so that you don't have to keep watering. When it comes to lawns, there are people who put the fake lawns out there. Where I'm at here in San Jose, it's against the law to use artificial turf in your front lawn.
Really?
It is.
Let me ask you, because I heard something on this, or maybe I read an article. I can't remember where I heard it from, but is the reason because of the danger that the lawn absorbs heat and it can actually cause burns?
I haven't heard the real issues about it. I think the big thing is when they put that law into effect, the fake lawns were the old AstroTurf, mm-hmm. and they were really ugly.
Okay. Gotcha.
Whereas now you can go to Home Depot and get some fake lawn that looks pretty decent. It looks better than 50% of the lawns you see out there that aren't well maintained. Right. But then you start to get into a question of what effect does that have on the environment? If every lawn in the city was fake, what does that do with the heat? Because it's a lot hotter when you're on artificial turf than when you're on regular grass.
And, I think where I may have heard this was an article that was in support of painting lawns, which has become a really growing trend. And I know businesses have popped up all over California where they're spraying the lawns. And it used to be, a real estate trick where they would, literally paint the lawn.
Right.
And they were in favor of doing that over the artificial, obviously, because they were saying that artificial lawns retain some higher amount of heat and could actually cause burns, if you're walking on them barefoot or your pets. Because I think they could reach 130 degrees or something like that.
They do get warm, but then cement gets warm as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I think the bigger thing is the way it looks, because again, the old AstroTurf, it kind of had that lime green color and it looked like a putting green and There was no character to it. It looked like somebody put carpet on their front lawn. Whereas now, there have been a couple that I have driven by and had to stop and say, wait a minute, is that real or is that fake?
Right.
And it takes a second or third trip by to confirm that it actually is fake. So then you start to wonder, well, is that really such a bad thing when we're dealing with the drought? And certainly
Right.
in the backyard, it's okay. So it's really, it's just the way that it looks, I think, is the reason why they decided to pass that law here in San Jose, because you can put it in the backyard and it's not a problem.
Right. Now, have you? I gotta say, I don't think I've ever actually seen a painted lawn. Does it look pretty natural?
I can't say that I know that I've seen one myself.
Oh, well, that's probably a good. That probably means it does look pretty
I
natural.
have to think it's going to be pretty obvious that it's a painted lawn. It's kind of like that hair in a can stuff that they used to sell for people who have a bald spot in the back of their heads. I mean, yeah, at first glance, you're not going to notice, but it won't take too much to realize that all the grass there is shriveled, and what you're really looking at is a lot of patches of dirt and whatnot. I guess if you've got a lawn that had been well maintained and you just haven't watered it, so it's just gone brown,
Right.
then painting it would be okay. But I don't recall seeing any that have been painted, so I have no idea what that would be. And again, maybe if you got a few brown spots or something and you're just trying to spruce it up a little bit, it could be okay. But I just don't see one of those lawns that has all of those dirt spots and stuff. I don't see the paint helping it much at all.
Now, another thing that you mentioned, if there are any municipal fines that are imposed for abusing water and things like that, you think that those are going to be imposed on the tenant versus the homeowner versus the landlord, right?
Yeah, that's probably going to be the case.
Because I know that another thing that I've seen in the news recently is a new app that's out that allows you to tell on your neighbor, basically,
Right.
that they're using too much water. It I don't know, some anonymous tip type of an app where you can rat out your neighbor and say, hey, they're using too much water, and we're in a drought right now. So be interesting, as long as the landlord's not being held responsible as the homeowner, or the landowner there.
Right. I think the only way the landlord could be responsible would be if you set up a timer and then didn't give the tenants access to the timer. You told them, we're going to control the watering. At that point, then the landlord would be responsible. But if the tenant is in full control of the watering of the landscaping, then it's going to be the tenant's responsibility. And it tends to be pretty simple. You just have to make sure that when you water your lawn or your landscaping, it doesn't run off into the street. That's the bottom line. So make sure that it's controlled in terms of the way that the sprinklers are set up, but more in terms of time. 5 or 10 minutes is more than enough time to water the lawn in most situations. When you run it for half hour, 40 minutes or whatever, it's going to start to run into the street, and that's kind of ridiculous.
Now, let me ask you this, because I know that we're talking a lot about and droughts and how they affect the landscaping and things like that. But what about inside of the home? What about things, basic necessities, showers and water usage inside of the home? How does that affect, in a drought situation? Are there rules regarding that as well?
We haven't gotten to that point yet where I'm at. There might be some parts of California where they're starting to do that. I know when we had the drought back in the 70s, they did a lot of things like talking to people about putting bricks in their toilets because you were taking up space in the toilet tank. So every time you flushed, you used less water. It would be a good and prudent thing for a landlord to try to replace all of the toilets with low flush, low water usage toilets, although that's an expensive thing. Simpler things would be to replace the shower heads with low flow shower heads. In most of the states in the country, there are laws about low flow shower heads. And, very often you'll find that you turn on the water in a hotel or something and there's just no flow. And that's usually the reason why. They're trying to conserve water. And you can get those for your houses. In fact, it's law here. I don't think you can buy something that's not low flow. And so it makes sense to check to be sure that all of those are still operating the way that they're supposed to.
Reminds me of that Seinfeld episode where in the building they installed all the low flow, and it was Kramer, was able to get his hands on a regular
Mhm.
shower head from the black market or something there.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. Making sure that obviously that comes down to making sure that your unit is up to code
Mhm.
and you've got all the right things in there. And I think that definitely circles back to the annual inspection to make sure that your tenant's not swapping any of your hardware out with something of their own.
Yes. And, if the tenant is paying for their own water, is it your responsibility? Mm, it's not that big of a deal in some senses, but at the same time, it's important for everybody during the drought situation to do their best to make sure that they're um, conserving as much water as possible, because we don't know what it's going to bring 3 months, 6 months from now. If we don't get water through the summer or through this winter that's coming up, we could be in really, really bad shape, much worse than we are now. So I would say start with the landscaping, but start thinking about the other things that you can and should do inside the house. That's a good point.
All right, well, definitely, like I said, a topic I don't have a whole lot of experience on, but it's certainly interesting. And I don't have any units in California, but I know a lot of our clients do, and it's definitely an issue that they've got to deal with and tackle there. Just like we've got snow issues here, it definitely affects you regionally and geographically. So if you're in an area, in a drought area like in California, especially Southern California, definitely pays to make sure that you're not only prepared for it, but your tenants are prepared for it, and you're doing everything that you can to make that situation at least as manageable as possible.
Yep, very true. Well, great, Stephen. Thank you very much. I look forward to talking with you tomorrow evening.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for listening to Landlord University, and remember to visit rentprep.com/landlordu to see show notes and access free resources like forms and guides. And be sure to check out Jeff Pearson hosting his own hit podcast at thementorimpact.com.